Hi friends, Nana's got another book for you today, and it's one of my favorites. I know I say it about a lot of books, but this really is one of my favorites too. Sorry about the reflection. I don't know how to fix that. Let's get started. How Fletcher Was Hatched by Wende and Harry Devlin. Alexandra sat in the sunlight watching a chick hatch from an egg. Beep! And it was out of its shell. Fletcher, she called to her dog, look at this dear chick. It's so tiny. It's so yellow. It's so fluffy.
It's so stupid,
growled Fletcher to himself. He gave Alexandra a hopeless look and walked to his water dish. It was empty. Another thing, he hadn't had his ears scratched in days.
No one wants a first-rate hound dog around here,
he thought to himself.
She's forgotten me.
Fletcher raised his head and howled miserably.
Moo!
Quiet, Noisy. The chicks are sleeping. Alexandra turned her back on Fletcher. With a wounded look, Fletcher shuffled mournfully away toward the park at the edge of town. At the far end of the park was a pond where Fletcher's faithful friends Beaver and Otter lived. Otter was splashing Beaver at the water's edge when Fletcher shuffled up. The animals weren't long in noticing Fletcher's sadness. Fletcher saw to that with a few deep moans and some very loud sniffles. Alarmed, they gathered close to hear his tale, to hear his story.
She's forgotten me, said Fletcher. She loves chickens. Cute, fluffy, peeping, stupid chickens.
Beaver and Otter, who were wild, free animals, didn't really understand Fletcher's deep attachment to his mistress, but they understood that Fletcher was terribly unhappy.
I'm terribly unhappy, said Fletcher.
Well, maybe if you were fluffy and yellow, said Otter doubtfully. Could you peep a little? Asked Beaver. If you could only hatch once in a while, said Otter. That's it, said Beaver, slapping his tail. We'll have you hatch. It will be a new beginning.
Me hatch, yelped Fletcher.
But Beaver and Otter paid little attention to Fletcher. They were soon in a warm discussion of how to make an egg large enough to hold a hound dog. With some misgivings, it's another word for doubts, Fletcher promised to do his part and act like a chicken. I don't know, he doesn't seem that excited about it, does he? They built the egg around Fletcher. All day they worked in the sun with reeds, clay, and river grasses. Otter sometimes stopped to tickle Fletcher's nose with a cornflower, but Beaver, who was a master builder, worked steadily, plastering pink clay evenly over a reed network. Reeds are like very bendy sticks. With his friends working so tirelessly, Fletcher couldn't complain even when wet lumps of clay dropped on his head. Here comes Otter with another reed. At last it was finished. Beaver had smoothed the clay over the surface with such artistry that there could be little doubt that this great pink pearly object was an egg that would have been a joy to any mother bird's heart. He speckled it brown in honor of Fletcher's own brown spots. 2 small holes were left in the egg so Fletcher could be fed water and a strawberry or 2. I don't know. My dog doesn't like strawberries. Did you have a dog? Does your dog like strawberries? Beaver and Otter and Fletcher were tired. It had been a long day's work. Shadows grew deeper and lengthened into the blue of night. And when the pumpkin-colored moon appeared on the rim of the pond, Beaver and Otter, nestling close to their great egg, lay deep in sleep. They look pretty happy about the job they did, don't they? Do you think Fletcher's comfortable? Inside the egg, feeling very homesick, Fletcher wondered if Alexandra was thinking of him. Back in the farmhouse, Alexandra lay awake under her red quilt. Tears fell on her pillow. How could she sleep with Fletcher gone, perhaps never to return? The clock struck 12 before she finally went off to sleep. 12 o'clock at night, that's midnight. She should be sleeping. At last it was morning. At the pond, the white surface of the water was broken by jumping frogs and leaping minnows. Otter and Beaver awoke and ambled down to the water's edge for a quick dip and breakfast. They didn't forget a few strawberries for Fletcher, who was discovering that the inside of an egg is a most unsatisfactory place to yawn and stretch. "Let's go," commanded Beaver. Now the animals started the last part of their plan. They very carefully pushed, shoved, and rolled the egg until they reached a large clump of grass by the path that led to Alexandra's school. Inside the egg, Fletcher felt a bit bruised and very confused. The town began to wake up slowly, and the sounds of traffic drove Beaver and Otter back to the pond and the tall grasses. They shouted goodbye. "Good luck, Fletch. And remember, no barking, just peeping."
Peep,
growled Fletcher, and then lay quiet. It was the custodian on the way to open the school. The custodian's usually the one who kind of takes care of the property or takes care of the building, who first discovered the amazing egg. Well, he looked surprised. Would you be surprised if you saw a big giant egg on the way to school? He shouted to some nearby children, "It's an egg! The biggest one in the world! Call the science teacher!" Soon a crowd of children gathered about, and their eyes were filled with wonder. "Where's its mother?" asked little Tommy. Its mother would be as large as a house," said round-eyed Gabby, shaking her blonde hair. "Bigger," said Robert. The science teacher scurried up to the crowd with his friend, Professor Schnitzer from the university. The crowd became larger, and members of the school band on their way for an early practice gathered close. The science teacher stood up on a park bench and shouted, "Don't touch it! It looks like a flat-billed prehistoric scratch-a-fratch! A priceless find!" And a respectful hush fell on the crowd. "Or perhaps it's the web-footed, pickle-faced dino-flyer," cried the professor from the university. Fletcher huddled inside the egg, quivering with excitement as he waited for Alexandra. Suddenly he heard her name. The children were telling her about the egg. Fletcher now began to get ready for the big moment, but Alexandra was making funny noises. Alexandra was crying. She told them that she didn't want to see a stupid old egg. She was looking for lost Fletcher. In fact, the only thing in the world she wanted was Fletcher. And then and there, Fletcher knew it was time to hatch. He pushed and stretched, and with a rising roar, he fairly exploded out of the egg. The crowd screamed and moved back. Fletcher shook himself, and the mud flew. Feeling that something was expected of him, he turned to Alexandra.
peep, he croaked.
Laughing and crying, Alexandra hugged him. The two men of science looked at their shoes and felt a little foolish. "Strike up the band," said the principal, hoping everyone had forgotten about his guess that the mother of the egg was a giant hen from Mars. The band played "Hurrah for the Red, White, and Blue." The principal, feeling called upon to bring the occasion to a close, meaning to kind of distract everybody from what had happened, faced the audience. He wiped his face with his handkerchief. "Only in America," he announced with great feeling, "could a hound dog hatch." This seemed to please everyone. With much clapping and whistling, the crowd began to fall away and go back home or wherever they came from. Alexandra skipped along with Fletcher. Fletcher panted happily. Sometimes Alexandra had to stop and hug her dog. Fletcher thought to himself,
You don't have to be hatched to be loved. You don't have to be yellow and peep. You can be a great hound dog with brown spots and be the most important creature in a little girl's life.
And he gave himself a good shake, and the last of the mud on his back went flying. And that's it. There's a fun picture of Beaver and Otter in the back. Do you have any pets? It would be nice to know what our pets are thinking sometimes, but if you watch them carefully, sometimes they can tell you with their eyes. If you have a pet, why don't you go give your pet a nice big squeeze?